Hey everybody, I hope y'all are doing well. Today we are going to be we're going to be recapping, reviewing the ID channel docuseries that came out, Doomsday, The Missing Children. Now again, this is about the Lori Chad Daybell case that centers around the children, JJ and Tylee. Now this was a 3-part series. Each part was 1 hour. I ripped through them, and so I just wanted to come on here, talk about the parts of it that stuck out, kind of do a recap for those that didn't get a chance to see it, and then just kind of talk about some of the stuff that we saw in the comment section below. Now, as usual, you can find the sources and further reading if you want to try and watch this for yourself down in the description box. And so let's go ahead and start talking about the things that stuck out to me about this. Now, for my regular viewers out there, you're probably noticing that everything has changed. My backdrop, I'm still on vacation in the North Carolina mountains. It is a gloomy, wintry weather day, so I was like, you know what? I want to get the fire going and record my video. I hope you enjoy it. It might be a little echoey just because of the acoustics in this room, but we're gonna get through it. Okay, so let's start off. First of all, I thought overall, if you are familiar with the case or not familiar with the case, this is an excellent series, docu-series, whatever you want to call it, that's going to give you a complete overview, not just an overview, but also get down into some of the little details. It can't get them all because, as you know or don't know, this case is crazy. I mean, there's rabbit hole after rabbit hole. What I felt that this particular series did, and I appreciated this, is that it brought the focus back to the children, hence the name, The Missing Children. Yeah, because right now the case is kind of like, you know, we're waiting for it to go to trial and all these crazy hearings are happening. And we're seeing this, you know, bizarre stuff come from Mark Means and John Pryor and yada, yada, yada. And so at the center of it, obviously, has always been JJ and Tylee, and other potential alleged victims of Lori and, you know, whoever else was involved with some of that stuff. So I really appreciated that about this. You know, it kept reiterating that. Where are the children? Where are the children? Where are the children? Now, as far as perspective goes, who is telling us this story? This story is mostly told through the eyes of Larry and Kay Woodcock. Those are the grandparents of JJ. Now, another thing that we see in this is we also see viewpoints from many other people. We're hearing from some key players in this. We're also hearing from, you know, some of Lori's brothers, their wives, you know, a nephew, Julie Rowe. Brace yourself. So, you know, we're hearing from this variety of people that really paint a fuller picture. And some of the things they said made me go, huh, what's that all about? Now, another overall thing that I thought this doc did really well is it really showed me how much JJ and Tylee meant to one another. We hear this through the stories that are told. We see this through some of the home video footage. It also makes it that much more heartbreaking because you're just like, oh my God. I mean, it's awful enough what happened, but then when you see the bond that those two children had, it just makes it that much more gut-wrenching. But I'm glad that it really brought that to the center. Now, one of the things that amazes me about this doc is the fact that so many of these people are all sitting here and saying, I never saw it coming. I never saw it coming. Lori was Mother of the Year. Lori was so normal. She was the best aunt. She was the best mother. And of course, we're over here sitting on the sofa like, are we sure we're talking about the same Lori? You know, we have questions about it at this point. But nonetheless, it adds that other layer to it. Now, we will get into here in a little bit how these same people started saying, yeah, she started doing some kind of crazy stuff after a while. But psychologically speaking, it is just interesting to see this trajectory. It's also heartbreaking because we know the result of it. Now, one person I was very interested to hear from during this was Lori's brother, Adam Cox. Now, Adam has a wife. Her name is Nicole. We also hear from her. Now, even though these people are all talking about how wonderful she was and Nicole makes a comment at one point. She's like, but there is always drama. You know, how could there not be with 5 marriages? And I mean, amen, sister. First of all, we know how the last 3 ended. Okay. You know, so there's that. Regardless, and I'm not trying to sit here and marriage shame people, whatever, it is what it is. Find your boo. You know, but even if you had non-complicated relationships and they just didn't work out and you got married and divorced 5 times, that's a lot going on. Then when you add into it the stuff that was going on with Lori, it's like, girl, I mean, drama, trauma, hot mess express. So, I just felt like Nicole, if you were hanging out with her, she'd have the real tea on Lori and be like, listen, here's what it is. Now, even though Adam talks of his sister, like she was this really great person and we also hear of some of these bizarre behaviors through him. So again, it's seeing that trajectory. And he's saying at one point that she told him she no longer needed to eat. And he says that she also told him at one point that if someone shot at her, like the bullet would like ricochet or go around her, like some kind of cartoon Bugs Bunny type stuff in my opinion. But it's interesting that she's, sharing these beliefs with, her family and whatnot, and that this stuff is allegedly real to her. Now, of course, those belief systems, the biggest one that like gripped me and grabbed my attention, and I don't know about y'all, let me know in the comment section, was the zombie talk. That one I was like, hold up. This is some Walking Dead stuff. This is some Night of the Living Dead stuff. I have questions, I have concerns, I'm scared, I'm frightened. Now, as we know now, multiple people through testimony, through conversation, whatever, have all testified about Lori talking about this zombie stuff to them. And essentially it was, another spirit or something living in another person. So, for example, Charles Vallow was no longer Charles Vallow. He was, I think it was Nick Schneider, whoever he was that Lori was saying was living in his soul. So it gets complicated, but sadly enough, we also know that she started saying, the kids are acting like zombies, and JJ's, crawling around on the kitchen table and the walls and stuff like this and doing zombie stuff. Me personally, I just felt like that was a very easy belief to get what she wanted and to be like, they're a zombie, we have to, do whatever we have to do with zombies now. That's a big cup of water to serve and to drink, because also with that is her trying to say, I'm part of the, I'm leading the 144 to rid the world of these people. So, well, what happens if you're not stable and like, let's get ourselves to the zombie thing's legit. Just work with this here for a second. The zombie thing's legit. That is a thing. Well, what happens if the person running the show is unstable and they just happen to not like this person over here? It sounds like the witch hunts of Salem. Now, about the zombie stuff, we hear from Kay talking about that when she started, learning about the zombie talk. Kay just has such a real way of expressing her feelings, a way that I can really connect with. And she just kind of says like what you're thinking, and she's like, with the zombie thing, like any of us, like what? What are you talking about? It's so absurd. And so I really like that we have been shown this story through their eyes. Again, my heart goes out to her. I mean, so many people in this case, but Kay and Larry, I mean, oh my God, they've done so much. Number one, to bring this all to light, the perseverance, all that is just amazing. So, there's that. I had to say it. Let's continue. Now, we also see things in this docuseries about, when Melanie Gibb testified about the zombie stuff, which is very sobering to hear that again through her words. Her weekend there where she was probably the last person, to see JJ alive and talking about how Lori said, he's acting like a zombie, and how, Alex brought him in. And it's so sad. And, even Adam, like I said, about the zombie stuff, he's like, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So here's him. Look at him compared to Alex. Adam's sitting here just like, what are y'all talking about? What are y'all talking about? So that contrast is very interesting to me. Now, we also see the unraveling of the situation of, Lori saying, JJ is going to live with his grandparents, but Kay and Larry are the ones who's asking for that welfare check. So we see that all unravel. And again, your heart just starts to sink because you're like, oh my God. Looking back, hindsight, now that we know what we know, it's just heartbreaking. And it also is very angering just in regards to the feelings that it conjures up towards Lori and to Chad. Now, another thing that's interesting is, we now know from those transcripts of Rob Wood and Mark Means, where Rob Wood is talking to Garrett Smith, the attorney, and Summer Shiflett. We know a lot of information from that. And in that, whether Rob was like, blowing sunshine around or whatever, talking about, I think that, Lori was a different person and something happened and looking at the evidence we see here of Lori, calling the schools, calling us, covering her tracks for JJ's disappearance, you can connect all these dots, You know, and I'm sure they've obviously done this behind the scenes in a legal or, you know, the cops, the investigators, whoever. You know, but it's interesting for us to be able to sit here and look at this stuff and start connecting these dots and be like, wow, she is 100% aware of what she's doing. She might have gone down some weird religious rabbit hole, but she knew what she was doing enough to cover her tracks and try and run and stay out of trouble. So then we also are walked through the Alex Cox and Charles Vallow event. Now again, they show us that 911 audio that we hear of Alex Cox calling in this situation that happened between him and Charles. We see those police body cams of them coming to the house and talking to Lori. For the life of me, I still do not know how any of that passed the vibe check with any of these people. You can just listen to Alex Cox's 911 phone call and be like, this isn't right. This isn't right. You can look at the body cam footage and say, why is she even acting that way? This is bizarre. This isn't right. You know, so that blows my mind, and every time I see it, it just gets my blood pressure going. And again, we hear and see through Larry and Kay's perspective about this information. You know, and Larry's watching the same stuff, and he just sums it up like, you know, we all do, and he's like, there's no emotion. You know, Alex is literally, he could be ordering a pizza. There's nothing there. There's absolutely nothing there. And Kay's like, look, all this stuff that Alex is alleging about, you know, him coming after Lori and you know, this is not how Charles was. She's like, it's not how he was. I didn't know the man. I can't say I was not there. Just the little bit that I have seen, you know, on the public perspective, let's say in this case, I mean, it doesn't even add up to me. You know, again, I wasn't there. You know, I don't know. But I tend to believe Larry and Kay over people like Alex and Lori. I'm sorry. And I have my feelings as to what exactly went down in that home. And it is not what Alex was saying. Now, of course, we know what was coming down the pipeline after all this happened. And Kay says, you know what, things got worse. You know, in regards with Lori's behavior, access to the children, all this type of stuff, when Lori found out about that insurance policy being switched over to Kay. She says that is what basically made Lori just cut off communication. And another thing that Nicole is the wife of Adam Cox. Adam Cox is Lori's brother. I'm just going back over it. Nicole's like, I told her that, you know, Lori would cut off communication. Honestly, I feel like if there is a family reunion with them, Nicole would be the fun one to hang out with, because I feel like she would be like, you want to know, you want me to sum everybody up? You want me to give you the tea, the 411 on everyone here? Come sit next to me. Now, during this time, Kay is saying, you know, you're seeing the struggle of her trying to get up with Lori to, you know, how is JJ? We need to hear from JJ. And they're talking about just this very limited communication. And obviously, where she was getting extremely concerned, I mean, her and Larry were, you know, extremely concerned. You know, and this is where, for me at least, I'm curious what y'all think. Let me know in the comment section about this. So watching this, I was like, ugh, she was so bent over that. This is where I feel like JJ also just became like this symbol of how she felt towards Kay. You know what I mean? It was just like this thing of just this pure, you know, unadulterated, just this evil feeling. And I feel like that was a huge part of whatever she had done or did to JJ. Now, also another thing that was interesting is Kay tells us when they learned, you know, so fast forward here a little bit. Kay's talking about, you know, when we found out that Alex Cox was no longer with us. And she's like, we were just shocked. I mean, it's just, you can't wrap your mind around it. It's just one more thing. And again, for them especially, it's one more thing of, whoa, where are the children? We need to get our hands on the children. Now, this is not good. Now, one thing that was very interesting in that regard, as far as Alex Cox and, you know, whatever happened to him, Adam Cox's brother said, you know what, yes, we've had these issues, health issues in the family. And Adam says, yes, my father and I had blood clots. That is a thing, but Alex never had them. And that doesn't sound right. So that part is very curious to me. You know, again, I'm not their family. I don't know all that. I have my own opinions of whatever could have possibly happened to Alex. And it could have just been as benign as doing the horrible things that he did brought about an untimely, you know, end of life scenario for him. Whether that was at the hands of just natural causes or Lori, that's up for debate as far as I'm concerned. But we'll see. Now, a part that really just made my heart jump into my throat is Kay talks about when she saw that famous footage that we've all seen now of Nate Eaton, I believe it is, when they found Chad and Lori in Hawaii and they're confronting them. Where are the children? Why don't you just tell us? People are looking for them. You know, and Lori's like, that's nice, or that's great, or something like that. I mean, they were completely aloof. I mean, Kay's watching this like, what? You're in Hawaii? You know what I mean? Like, you fled. Like, at this point, they know something's bad. You know what I'm saying? But watching them live through it in that moment, you're just like, oh my God, I can't imagine. And Kay says, you know, watching it, she's like, I can't believe the indifference of Lori. And that is what's so shocking is, I mean, again, it's like these people, when they're dealing with this stuff, they might as well be ordering a pizza from Domino's. It's just... It just is so blasé to them, and it's so shocking as to how that could come to be. Now, of course, you know, they go over the whole aspect of when finally, you know, Lori was given that ultimatum of produce the children in 5 days, you know, whatever it was, and we're going to go from there. This is basically, that's the point that I really started kind of paying attention to this case. And I remember thinking, I was like, either, and I told, I think Denise, it was somebody, I was like, look, they're either going to produce the children and we're going to find out they're in some cult, which is kind of what a lot of people were thinking. You know, I mean, no one just had any idea. Or I was like, it's going to go sideways, and it's going to go sideways hard. You know, and honestly, I was a little surprised when they didn't produce the children, because I was like, really? I mean, like, really? Now, one part that this documentary shows that I was just like, oh my God, is they showed during like their search, I mean Larry and Kay's search for the JJ and Tylee and what was going on. You know, they go to this place, the apartment, the condo, the townhome, whatever you want to call it, that Lori was living in Rexburg. And they go and they knock on the neighbor's door. And, you know, because apparently this is the neighbor that had the boy that JJ would play with. And, you know, they're asking questions, and they're like, you know, what seemed to be going on? And I believe that they did say, you know what, in the days, like right before, it seemed like JJ was kind of upset, you know, of something going on. They also said, you know, we wondered why Tylee wasn't around, because they had noticed that a sitter had come in to watch JJ, which, you know, we know now that wasn't normal. Tylee would watch him. But also, you know, they spoke very highly of JJ. They're like, he's so creative, you know, he had so much fun here playing. And, you know, at this point, some point during that, Kay just breaks down crying. She has to go to the car. You know, and her sobs, I mean, it gives me goosebumps right now. I mean, if you could put audio, a sound to a broken heart, that is it. You know, it just, I mean, my beard's standing up. My hair's standing up right now. I mean, it's just, you want to just reach out and hug her. And Larry does, you know, he's such a kind gentleman, you know, and he really just comforts her, and she comforts him as well during his times. The neighbor says that the last time they saw them was the 26th of November, and that Lori and Alex had said, you know, we're going on a trip, and the neighbor said, yeah, I did not see JJ with them at that point, you know, so it just... Now, another thing that we watch is their reaction to that, again, that infamous footage of when Lori with and a couple of unidentified people, I believe it was Alex at one point, or Chad, and maybe those two went to the storage unit, you know, and they're like seeing how they dissected every frame. And there is that frame where they're walking away and it looks like something's flopping over the edge, and you're like, oh my God, is that a little kid's leg or their arm? You know, and they're just saying how much they studied it and blew the picture up and went over it and just looking for anything. One common theme through this is when they're talking to people, they're like, was there a scooter? Did they leave a scooter? Because there's certain things that they knew. If this is left behind, if this isn't with them, something is wrong. The little scooter, that little thing he rode around, was one of those things. Obviously, the medicine for him was a huge thing. Yeah, but you know how kids are. They attach onto something, you know. And at one point they are like, yeah, there was a scooter and the stuff. And it was one of those just sinking feelings for them, even though they were holding out hope the whole time. Then, of course, we see that footage of Lori getting arrested. And, you know, obviously, it's just a shock to people like Larry and Kay, and to others as we were watching it. Because, again, at that point, we're like, just say what the children are. You know, and it was one of those things where it's like, if they're okay, just say. And that sinking feeling of, well, that's why they're not. And Adam said, you know, about his sister, he was like, you know what, I thought jail would snap her out of whatever she was in. It would be this wake-up call. And he was like, I was shocked that it was just this, you know, out there, Lori, still there, riding out, whatever it is, she's riding out. Now, there's another part where we see that when Lori is being sent back to Idaho, and the Woodcocks are like, okay, they're there. I mean, they're like here for all this stuff. And so they go out there, and while they're there, they're like, you know what, we're gonna go by Chad's. You know, they wanna see the place. And they go out there, and literally, now that we know what we know, you're like, oh my God. You know, they had no idea that those kids were in the backyard. I mean, none of us did. You know, but it's just spine chilling. So let's visit our little friend Chad for a little bit. Now we hear from friends of the Daybells. You know, and these people are like, look, Chad was like by the book Mormon, you know, Mr. You know, and his first few books and whatnot, they were very just on brand for that whole thing. Now then they say, you know, then Chad had this, you know, near-death experience. Allegedly. Remember, there was that author who he worked with, who she had a near-death experience, and then suddenly, miraculously, Chad has one and becomes an expert in it. You know, it is what it is. But regardless of whatever happened with him and his near-death experience, you know, this is when this friend says his stuff, his beliefs, this is where they started to notice a change, a skew, if you will. And this is a big time where Chad's like, look, I can like talk to people on the other side of the veil and get like really good intel. Now the same friend in this says, you know what, in our belief system, and I believe that she's talking about LDS, not Chad's new thing, but she's like, it's real taboo to like talk about your dreams or, you know, spiritual experiences, stuff like that. And so again, I don't know anything about that world, but if what she's saying is accurate, I'm like, isn't it intriguing that this whole crowd is just dying to get out there and tell everyone about all that stuff, yet hide behind the veil, not that veil, the other veil, you know, of, oh no, we're totally normal, we're LDS, we're Mormon, we're not, you know, into that real crazy zombie stuff. Now they start talking about, you know, how Chad started becoming a prepper and how that started working its way in. You can see all these different odd beliefs coming to this horrible intersection. Now, I think we all know that a discussion about this case isn't complete without a discussion on Julie Rowe. Y'all know she made her appearance, her token appearance. Now, Julie's like, he had this like amazing spiritual gifts, you know, one of those being like he was able to write all these books. And I'm like, well, it couldn't have been that good, because in a minute I'm going to talk about the friend that was like, he only made about $2,000 a year off these books. Regardless though, Julie has always been very impressed, it seems, with Chad, and not just her, but these other people involved with, they talk about these amazing spiritual gifts. And I'm just like, y'all, I'm not seeing it. Maybe y'all are. Clearly, I don't know the man, you know, but I'm having a hard time buying much of anything out of this guy. Now, Julie also says, you know what, most of his books were written like geared towards middle-aged women. And she also brings light to the fact that, yeah, you know what, as you'll hear from others, he didn't really sell a ton of books, you know, didn't make too much money a year off of it. And so that's when he got a side hustle, if you will, of being a grave digger. And I'm just like, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, if they come out with Friday the 13th, part 13, I think they're up to now, if they ever do, please let them come out with it. This is part of the plot. I mean, literally, this is the person who works at the convenience store that's like a part-time gravedigger that warns all the kids not to go in the forest. You know, it's just unbelievable. Now, Julie also sneaks in a little sales pitch. I mean, she talks about her own books. Now, she talks about her own books, her own spirituality, how the veil's always been thin for her. Now, she says because the veil has always been thin for her, she has always been able to see light and dark spirits and to hear the Lord's voice. She also says that it is her life's mission to prepare people for Christ's return, and you can buy into this plan for $29.99 a month, and you can also get free shipping if you call now. Now, we hear from another one of Chad's friends who says, you know what, at one point Chad received a prophecy that was like, you gotta go to Idaho, it's the chosen land. And the friend does say, you know what, somebody that worked with Chad or whatever published a book talking about Rexburg was a sacred place and yada yada yada. I think it's interesting how he gets like life decisions from these self-published books that people do. I'm like, do you even know if this stuff's real that they're writing? I mean, do you vet it out? I doubt it. So let's talk about Tammy Daybell. So they bring to light the whole the bizarre situation with her, you know, and at the time of this recording, I still don't know anything about the autopsy yet. I'm dying to hear about that. But, you know, they talk about how there was that paintball incident, and then 10 days later, she passes in her sleep. I mean, y'all, this is completely suspect. We know this. And one of Chad's colleagues, former colleagues or whatever, echoes what we all said. They're like, it was a shock. She wasn't unhealthy. But we weren't expecting this. This was bizarre. And it was even more bizarre to then learn that this man was off marrying somebody within weeks. Now, another aspect that we see Mr. Chad in, as well as Lori, that was interesting, is that bail hearing, the one where she comes out with the eye makeup and the lipstick, and you're hearing from Kay and Larry, and they're talking about, oh my God, we're gonna be in the same room, and yada, yada, yada. And I mean, my hat's off to them again. I don't know if I could do it, but we see that, and then Chad walking past them, Lori walking past them, never making eye contact, never acknowledging. I mean, I can't imagine I would if I was Lori or Chad. But then really the only thing happening is Lori turned around looking at Chad. And I'm like, what? I mean, so clearly, and they even say this, like, we're seeing this whole bizarre attachment and detachment to a former self at the same time. Now, Kay says that the latter part of 2018 is when she really started to notice the shift with Lori. And she attributes this to her changing religious views. And she says in general, Lori was just absent. Now, Adam Cox describes their upbringing in the church. And he's like, yeah, you know what? There was definitely a change. Now, one example that he cited was he was like, yeah, Lori started going to temple like 4 or 5 days a week for hours at a time. And he's like, you were only expected to go to temple like once a month. Now, he also talks about Lori's obsession with the end times and Christ's return. And then Nicole, his wife, Adam's wife, talks about like these buckets, these prepper buckets that Lori started sending out to the family. And I'm just like, I'm sure those made real cute Christmas presents. Now, this is where even Adam starts talking about some of these other groups that are involved. And he's like, yeah, around this time is when Lori started listening to Julie Rowe's podcast. And I'm like, interesting. Now, they also talk about this other group preparing a people and how Chad got involved with them and how much he was involved with them and how this is where, Lori met Chad. Now, others that knew of her was like, oh yeah, she was like super obsessed, like into all Chad's writings before she ever met. So again, it was almost like this like enigma or something like that to her when, she met him. So there's like already this palette, if you will, for disaster. Now, by the last episode in this, the family's talking about this transition that she made, this obsession of these new beliefs and all this stuff. Now we hear from Zach Brown. This is Lori's nephew, and he lived with her for a little bit. And so this is very interesting to hear from like a younger person's perspective of the craziness of Lori. Now he said they would be like around the house, like in the kitchen, whatever, and that Lori would start all of a sudden being like, I'm seeing spirits and da-da-da-da-da, and interacting with them. He said another event about Lori having a face-to-face screaming match with the devil, and I'm like, was it the mirror? That's my only question. Had she stumbled upon the bathroom mirror and gotten into a verbal altercation? Now, he also talked about this event that is just creepy. And he was like, November 2018, Charles and JJ were out of town. And he said he came home and there's like all these cars lined up on the street and everything. And he said he walked in and there was like, a gathering at the house or whatever. And there's a speaker speaking to this group, I think 30 or 40 people. And he was like, when I walked in, everything went quiet and the speaker turned and looked at me, and he was like, almost like in unison, this whole room all turned and just stared me down. And he was like, it gave me the worst feeling. It was like a horror movie. It was so creepy. And I'm like, dude, get out of there. Now, obviously, all these things are leading up to the tragic moment of when we find out what happened to the children. Now, we see through the perspective of Larry and Kay when the investigators are searching Daybell's property. And so if you've seen that stuff, that footage, Daybell's in his truck being a coward. They're searching. We now know that Lori happens to call in during this time. And basically he knows he's in for it. They're on to him. They're going to be getting him. Now Kay recounts, the moment that she got that phone call of, there's remains found. And it's obviously heartbreaking. They pack everything up. They are going to Rexburg and they are headed there. Now, when they get there, they check into their room, whatever. Larry gets one of his vertigo episodes. He is in bed and it's like, I can't get out. My body is like, no. But at the same time, the FBI is basically contacting them and like, we need a formal identification. And I'm like, oh my God, I always forget about that process. And in this, Kay's saying like, I don't know, I can't do it. I don't know if and thank God she didn't have to. Well, during this part, we see Brandon Boudreaux. Remember, this is Melanie Pulowski's former husband. And so he comes into the picture, and I was like, oh, wow, okay. And he comes in, and he's basically like, look, you know what, he's coming up there for the same reason, let's get together, but I will go make the identification. He's like, Larry, your body is telling you, no, you cannot do this. Let me go do this for you. And Kay even says, and it's something, we all think, she's like, Brandon, are you sure that's an image you're never going to get out of your mind? And he goes through with it. And I thought that was really awesome. I thought it was awesome how they came together, how he was there for them, and how he could do something that big and life-changing for whomever has to do it. And I'm just glad that Larry and Kay, after all they've been through, didn't have to go do that part. Now we find out that they end up basically using a photograph for that aspect, so he didn't actually have to go and see poor JJ, in person or whatever. So that happens, and that's amazing. Now, of course, all of this leads up to, more of that infamous courtroom footage. Now, we're shown some of those preliminary hearings, and again, Larry and Kay right there, front row, and they're sitting, you can remember seeing if you watched it. Chad's here, and Larry and Kay are back here, just shaking their heads all the way. She said, we were warned, we were told this is some of the information that's coming out. They prepped them for this because it was going to be horrible, obviously. And you just feel their pain. The stuff that you're learning on the stand, you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And so, but they said, Chad never looked at us, never did anything. Obviously, we know if you've watched it, if you followed it, that yes, there's enough evidence, this is going to trial, yada, yada. And you really, at this point, you just feel like, even with the case or just the documentary, it does a good job at getting you to the emotional place where you are with Larry when he's going out and meeting the press and clapping. And he's like, God is good. You know what I'm saying? You are there because you're feeling it. You've gone through their struggle. This documentary has done such an excellent job at expressing the tragedy and the heartbreak that they have gone through. So again, one of the reasons I feel like they even named this, Doomsday, the Missing Children, is because in this case, that was a central thing to begin with. Where are the children? Where are the children? And you literally hear Larry and Kay asking that question over and over and over and over through this documentary. Where are the children? Where are the children? It's just what the whole world was asking. And so I felt it was such an appropriate title. It was such a simple question to ask, but it was so insanely hard for Lori or Chad to ever try to answer. And as we know now, they couldn't answer that question. Now, if you haven't seen the documentary, like I said, there's a link down below, to let you know where you can try and catch it if you have on demand or ID's app or whatever. You can go try and check it out there. Even if you're really familiar with this case, you've watched it all, definitely watch it. It's good. It gives you a different perspective. You're seeing a lot of Larry and Kay. You're seeing other people in this case bring some interesting little tidbits that, a lot of it we've heard before, some of it we haven't, but regardless, it's still telling a beautiful story of these two children, their relationship, and the impact that they had on those around them that loved them and cared for them, that seems to now reach to the world. Now, if you want to see more of my commentary on this case, there's a huge playlist of it. Just click the thing that's popping up over here right now. Thank you to the channel subscribers, the Sofa Squad, the channel members, the Patreons, the mods, everyone who makes this channel possible, all the viewers, thank you. I couldn't do it without you. I greatly appreciate it. And let's see justice come to the forefront for these two children. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later.